Thinking of starting a business on furlough? Well, watch on. As a business accountant, my team and I spent all day long helping business owners on their journey. And as you can imagine, over the last year, with a lot of people being on furlough, we're seeing a ton of new startups that are done. And it's almost like there should be a hashtag, hashtag furlough business or furlough startup, because there are a ton of really good businesses that we've seen, spoke to, and able now to work with that have started this business while they have this extra time on their hands. So I think during the comments, there was a few people who wanted a video on this, so I thought it'd be a great one to cover off and talk about some of the issues. I think we've done some other video on things to consider if you're employed and have kind of like a side hustle or a new startup that you're doing alongside. But in this video, we're also going to cover several of those topics. So before we get into it, if you like these type of videos, make sure to click the subscribe button below so you're notified whenever we release another one just like it. So let's start with the basics. So one of the things that is definitely key to check is to start to see if you could legally, as far as your employer is concerned, start a business. So what I mean by that is a lot of employment contracts actually restrict you from having another job or potentially going self-employed. So check that's the case, that you can actually do it. I've spoken to several people, and I know a few of the team have over the last year, where people have gone and checked their contracts and then gone, oh, actually I can't and I need to ask for my employer's permission. I've seen a few that haven't bothered with the employer's permission and just want to keep it under the radar, but hey, that's up to you. But you do need to go and check in there just to make sure that's okay. So that'd be the first point, check that there's no problem with your employer. I mean, if you're concerned about your job and stuff, I suppose it's less of a concern, but do check those things. And then have a think about, okay, well, I want to set this business up. How do I go about that? And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, there's tons of content on our YouTube channel there that and playlists about how to set yourself up as self-employed or how to set yourself up as a limited company. My first massive piece of advice to you is do absolutely pause before thinking of forming a limited company. We speak to so many people who haven't considered the extra record keeping requirements and the extra cost around getting everything filed for a limited company. So do check. I mean, there are amazing things in the right circumstances. And again, there's plenty of guides on that and plenty of blogs on our website if you want some insight into whether that's right for you. But ultimately, don't do it by default. I see a lot of people going, oh yeah, that sounds cool because it'd be this own thing. And it is cool, it's really cool, and it's a big deal. But as a result, people get kind of caught up in that coolness and then fail to realize actually for them, they should have been better off testing as a sole trader, because there's nothing stopping you later making that transition. So do consider those things. And also, it's easier and quicker to get going as a sole trader. You can just get going. There's not too much red tape in the way. With a company, there's several hoops you've got to bounce through and everything else to get it all up and running and going. So do consider how you're going to work. I mean, there's things as well like partnerships and all these other things, but generally they're the two that people look at: sole trader or limited. If you do decide to go sole trader, as I mentioned, you can kind of just get going on it, and you need to register with the revenue really when you start earning over £1,000 or more from your sort of side hustle business, this new startup, because at that point you don't have a trading allowance. And again, there's a video on a trading allowance that we've done, but over £1,000 you want to get registered and get your tax return going. There are reasons actually to register even if you're making a loss, but that's probably outside the scope of this video. But as an absolute must, once you've gone over this £1,000, it's likely you're going to have to pay tax if you've got a furlough pay coming in. So do that straight away, get registered. Now, the next point I think is key to consider when you're starting a new business, and this is a generic business one, and we see this a lot, and this is through experience of working with owners over these past years, is that is having a clear understanding, especially if you're a service-based business, of what your product is. What is it you're selling? Who do you help? What is your pricing? And I know that sounds really obvious, but actually I think it's one of the biggest things. And I think even as you progress in your business life and add services and everything else, that is in constant motion. And we talk about that you can actually end up procrastinating a little bit around these kind of things. But this is the one key thing I think you do need. We've seen it with owners and they've struggled not having a clear piece. Obviously, if you've got a product, you know what that product's going to cost. Obviously, do your research and make sure you've encountered all of the right costs so you really understand what your true kind of profit when you sell that thing is. So if you're doing Etsy or Amazon or eBay or any of these things, you understand that, with the taxes and any taxes that are applicable, with postage, with all these things, you end up actually in the kind of profits that you want to end up with. So do your maths, but ultimately you're going to know. With the service business, we find a lot of people, I do this thing, and then someone will ask them, okay, well, how much and how does it work? And they'll be like, oh, I don't really know. And that's a barrier. So do make sure you're really clear on what you do. And I think the reason that's even more clear is when you start to look at how you're going to gain customers and talk to people on the internet about it, You kind of need this understanding of these are the people I help and this is how I help them, and I can explain it clearly in like 30 seconds or a minute, about what I do. And the amount of times people will talk to me, they're like, I'm in agile IT, or I'm in this or that, and I don't know what those things mean. I'm a simple guy, right? I just want to know what you do and how you can help me. So that, I think, is critically important from an overall business point of view. Tax and everything else aside, that's a key business startup thing, I think, that really needs to be thought out before you get going. And then it kind of leads me into get going. I think one of the other things we see owners that have got going but don't really understand kind of what they're doing. I've actually kind of got more time for that than I have for the other way around, where it's kind of like, I want to start this business. Cool. Have you started it? Yeah. I'm looking at a website and I'm thinking of this. Okay, cool. But how are you going to get customers? It's that getting going. Stop thinking it's going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. It's always going to be in constant motion. You can always look at your website, or you can always look at your building, or you can look at your product. You can do all these things and constantly want to improve it. But ultimately, at the beginning, it's about taking money from people and providing value. And the only way you're going to do that is by actually putting yourself out there, getting going, get on the networking groups, put yourself on the website, get a Facebook page, just do it. There's all these things that people are like, I'm thinking about doing it. And you end up just further down the road. And the problem is, with furlough particularly, you're on a time limit. As we're talking now at the end of March, you've only got till September max. For a lot of people, it's a lot shorter than that, where you've got this income. And I think it's one of the amazing things and opportunities you have now. If you're on kind of full furlough, or even flexible furlough, where you're only doing a few hours, you've got all that spare time where you could potentially invest with a safety cushion that you're never going to have. It's why we see so many people starting businesses when they get made redundant, is they have that cash kind of runway. And of course, that cash always runs out quicker than people think. It takes longer than you think to get customers. And that is why you've got to get going. You've got to do it now. You've got to get going now, because you've only got really a couple of months. And then if you're not got a lot of savings, or you don't want to use any savings, you're going to run out of time to get customers and make sure that this works. Because you might find what you actually set out to do initially is not the right offering, and you need to pivot your own offering around what works in the market based on what you found people have got a demand for. And again, that takes time. So get on with it. Don't worry about how perfect your website is, or how good your business card is when you're actually out meeting people face to face. Just get basic site up, get the things you need to say, look, I'm in business, and get talking to people and go from there. And then once, of course, you have gone from there, the next tip that I would give, based on what we've seen being successful with business owners, is be consistent and do it regularly. The most success we see with business owners is that they just come in time and time and time again. It's consistent. They don't post on Facebook for like once a week for 2 weeks and go, that social media thing's rubbish. They realise that it takes, a lot of traffic and a lot of traction. And they do lots of different types of things and try it. And it's that action, it's that constant action. They'll be in networking groups, they'll be doing your Facebook, they'll be doing the Instagram, they'll be doing the LinkedIn, and might be doing YouTube, and finding out what works for them. And through those learnings, then be able to put those into practice. But it only comes through happening and being consistent. And I think that's the key. When we see with owners where it has worked, consistency is a massive key. And also then you don't get too downhearted, because it will take longer in the majority of time for you to get the type of income and customers and clients that you expect. I think most people think, just do this, post on the internet, wham, customers. Generally doesn't happen. Don't get me wrong, the internet can be, and we have seen it and experienced it, where the YouTube can be kind of a money machine, where you turn a piece of content on and it works for you. But generally, I'd say in the vast majority of people we work with, that's not the case. So consistency, regularly, and get on with it, really. And then finally, it would not be right of me as an accountant to talk to you in a video about business and startups and getting going without mentioning tax, right? So if you are there and you have got furlough, the chances are your income is going to be all of your personal allowances. So you get, like, at the time of recording this video, you get around 12.5 grand a year tax-free. So you don't get taxed on it. Now they'll be using that in your furlough pay to make sure that you're paying the appropriate amount of tax on your furlough pay, unless you're getting a really, really low income. But you'd expect the majority of your personal allowance to have been used and eaten up in that furlough pay, which means if you are earning profits over £1,000 in, say, your self-employed new side hustle, then you are going to be a point where you will need to store some tax. And of course, depending on how much furlough pay you get in, it's likely that you're probably going to end up needing 20% tax put aside, but there also could be some national insurance contributions. And we've done another video on this, but as a rule of thumb, and it is a pure rule of thumb, try to put around 25% of your profit to one side. It generally works for lots of other reasons. There's another video on this, you can definitely check it out. But put around 25% aside and just be ready, because if you've never done that kind of thing before and you start using all this extra income, you're going to get a bit of a shock when it comes to doing that tax return for the first time. If you do go down the limited company route, forget that £1,000 thing that I mentioned, because that only applies to sole traders. When I was saying about registering for as self-employed, that only applies if you're a sole trader. If you're a limited company, you're going to start paying tax on anything that's in there. And that's a whole kettle of fish, and you might need to look at what you've got to do there. But again, you want to retain some money. About 20% is a good kind of value, again, of profit. The tax rate in the company is only 19%, but without going too deep into it, I think 20 is a nice little cushion there to make sure that you've accounted for things you might not have thought of. So yeah, it just gives you an idea. But if the majority of people I'm talking to here, you're probably going to end up self-employed because you followed my advice early on, and as a result, 25% is going to be about right for you. It's probably going to be too much if we're honest, but it's going to be a good level. So there you go, that's it. That's our top tips based on our experiences working with owners who have successfully done this on furlough. So good luck to you, and we'll see you on the next one.